Hello everybody and welcome to another top 10 board gaming video. Today's video is all about hobby card games, but before I get started, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all of my various social media pages as well as my Patreon page. On all of those you'll be able to interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really cool ways. So jumping right into it, this is a video that I have been wanting to make for quite a while and you guys have been recommending and requesting that I do. I'm so happy to finally make it because ever since I started this channel, I have been committing the mortal sin of mixing and matching card games and board games. Part of the issue was that I always had a difficult time really separating the two and saying what is a card game versus what is a board game. A lot of board games involve cards, a lot of card games involve boards in some form or another. So what I wanted to do is first off nail down my personal definition of where I'm going with this. Essentially, I'm saying that a card game can involve a board of some sort or any other mechanics, but it is primarily card driven, whether it's you're picking actions, you're discarding cards in order to do certain things, whatever it happens to be. The cards are your power, they are your weapons, they are everything to the game, and then a board might be there to track certain things, but it is not necessary. If you have a board that's really necessary, then I am not considering it a card game. That said, I'm sure a lot of you have different opinions about what this means, and you know I love to hear from you, so please put any and all thoughts into the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say and how your thoughts might differ from mine. But that said, we're going to get started with my own number 10. At number 10, I've got Mecha Koro, the game of urban planning and development. In this game, essentially, you're going to be collecting cards and building a tableau that represents certain buildings of a city. And the idea is that you roll dice to see what is going on. Now, the reason this is so low on the list is primarily that dice rolling mechanic. I'm not a huge fan of it. We've seen it in Settlers and other things like that, but the game itself is pretty awesome. You've got a decent amount of strategy with it. You've got a lot of different ways that you're able to win, and most importantly, for this particular video, it is exceedingly card driven. Those are the only pieces that you've got in the entire game. In addition, very family friendly and super easy to learn. Mecha Koro, my number 10. At number 9, I've got an old favorite, Race for the Galaxy. This game is essentially an older version of what you guys might be more familiar with, Roll for the Galaxy. This is another tableau building game where in this particular case you're trying to conquer various planets and developments and then enable sort of an engine building mechanic through the use of specific phases round after round. The reason that this game is so low on the list is essentially because it has become ridiculously bloated. There are so many expansions to this and so many different ways you can start, end, and all that kind of stuff. You have a ton of replayability, but it's very easy for new players especially to get lost. In addition, as I've played it more and more, Roll for the Galaxy has really taken a front seat to this one in my personal opinion, but that said, every single component in this game is exclusively cards. And on top of that also, this can be kind of a difficult game to get into because of the symbology that's involved with it, so it's a little bit lower because of that as well. But with all of that, Race for the Galaxy is my number 9. At number 8, I've got one of my personal favorite games of all time, Sheriff of Nottingham. In this game, players are trying to bluff whoever is the sheriff for that particular round to try to smuggle goods into Nottingham, or they'll tell the truth and just bring in legal goods. In this game, you do have boards, you have player boards, but they are not necessary. Essentially, you're just tucking under your resources as you bring them into the city. The reason that this is a little bit lower on the list, or rather quite a bit lower on the list, is for two major reasons. First off is those boards. It kind of takes away from the card game feel of it. Second thing is that this is really more about social and negotiation type of gameplay, and it's not nearly as meaty as some of the other ones on this list. And so because of that, it's lower on the list. That said, it is still one of my favorite games of all time, and it is easy to learn, easy to play, and a ton of fun. Sheriff of Nottingham, my number 8. At number 7, I've got the DC Deck Builder. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Well, Danny, of course you have to have a deck builder on this video, but why is it that you picked DC? So the reasons are several. First and foremost, Legendary. I actually enjoy that game a little bit more. I'm more of a Marvel fan than I am a DC fan, but Legendary has this huge board that you always have to use, not to mention the sort of expansions where you have Alien and Predator and all that kind of stuff. DC Deck Builder, you don't have any such things. You have giant cards that you use as sort of player mats, and so I think that's a fun little way to deal with the issue. And then of course there's things like Dominion down here, as well as Thunderstone and a whole bunch of other different deck builders. I personally just prefer DC. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I'm very familiar with the characters, and it's just a well done deck building game. That said, it's lower on the list because similarly to Race for the Galaxy, it's become really bloated. There's an awful lot of both good and really bad expansions to this game, but all in all, it's really fun. Number 7 is DC Deck Builder. At number 6, I've got Arkham Horror, the card game. This game is on my list for two major reasons. First and foremost is that I love the Lovecraftian mythos, I love the Cthulhu mythos, and I love how Fantasy Flight has handled putting it into the gaming form. Secondly is that this is relatively unique amongst living card games in that you play it cooperatively rather than competitively. You still have your individual decks and you're playing through, fighting the bad guys, doing all that kind of stuff, just like you do in Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror and all of those other types of games, but it's just a unique, different experience because it's based off of a deck of cards. That said, it's lower on the list for the same reason as several of these, in that it's a living card game, so if you really want to keep going and keep moving, you got to expand it. But that said, the base game is perfectly fine. It's really reasonable. It's not exactly family friendly. It's not one of those categories because it is about like death and cultists and murder and stuff like that, but it is a great strategic game, and again, with the fact that you can play it solo or with two players, it's a little bit versatile in that sense as well. Arkham Horror, my number 6. At number 5, I've got Century Spice Roads. This is a game that I've talked about several times relatively recently because I just enjoy it so much. I have had an absolute blast with this. You've got a little bit of resource management, a little bit of trading, a little bit of machine building or engine building rather, and just a lot of different things coming together in a really well-designed game. And it's nice because it's very much card driven. You do have a couple of little boards and little pieces and stuff along those lines, but again, it's not really necessary for you to enjoy or play through the game. That said, it's a little bit lower on the list just because it's newer for me. I haven't played it as much as I would have liked to have, and once I get more plays in it, then I'll probably be a little bit more confident in it. But with all the hype that it's been getting, I'm very, very comfortable putting it at this spot. Century Spice Road, my number 5. At number 4, I've got Battle Line, my favorite Reiner Knizia game. This is extensively card driven. Yes, you do have some pawns that just represent who is winning and losing type of thing, but at the same time, you're just trying to make poker hands. It sounds very, very simple, but it is incredibly strategically deep. You've got a lot of give and take type of mechanics going on with it between you and the other player, and the whole idea of playing the person rather than necessarily playing the game. Are you going to throw away one thing in order to save others, and all of that kind of stuff? Not to mention the special ability cards that you have throughout the game, a surprising amount of replayability in a really, really small package. But that said, it does involve those little pawns, so it's a little bit lower on this list, but not so much that it's really significant. Battle Line, my number 4. At number 3, I've got Seven Wonders Duel. Now, this is a game that I have had a complete 180 around since it came out. At first, I was really uncertain about it. I didn't think that I would enjoy it, and then I played it more and more, and I realized that I absolutely adore it. I honestly like it more than I enjoy Seven Wonders. I find that the two-player game like this is a lot tighter, it's more tightly designed, and it's a lot more fun. You have a much more cutthroat attitude within it. Now, granted, you do have a board that's on the side tracking military might, but I'm gonna let that slide for this particular one because the main crux of the game is all about the cards. You're collecting your sets, you're collecting your building capabilities, making up your engine, and doing all of that kind of stuff. Not to mention the wonders themselves are big giant cards, so that takes any sort of board and throws it out the window, metaphorically. The game itself is very easy to learn, especially if you already know Seven Wonders. It's one that even younger kids can learn, and since it's a two-player game, you can play with your kids, your significant other. It's a great date night game, really fast to play as well, and so it's a lot of fun, and you can do a lot of cool color matching exercises and all that kind of stuff if you're playing with younger kids. But that all said, Seven Wonders Duel is my number 3. At number 2, I've got Bonanza. This is a game that constantly surprises people with how much fun and strategic it can be. You think about it, it's a game about planting and gathering beans. How can that be of interest at all when then 10 minutes later they're just like, no, I don't want to pick my blue beans. I'm almost to the point. And it's absolutely hilarious because the strategy comes from the idea of you have to plant a bean, and if you can't or don't want to plant it, then you have to get rid of it somehow. Somebody has to be willing to take it, trade it, whatever it happens to be. And so you get a lot of really unique table interaction, and on top of that, every single component in the game is a card. It scales up very nicely from 2 to 7 people, and it's really fun and easy to learn. You've got cartoony things, so it's very family friendly and just a lot of fun. Bonanza, my number 2. At number 1, I've got Illuminati. Here I've got the first edition of the game. The second edition was recently reprinted, and I must say that I love absolutely everything about this game. I love the secrecy of it. I love the attacking, the defending, the negotiation. I love the tongue-in-cheek humor of all of the different cards, how they get controlled, how they don't get controlled, all of that kind of stuff. Not to mention the fact that every single thing except for the money is all purely cards. This is definitely a card game if I have ever seen it, and by far one of the most complex card exclusive games that I have ever seen as well. The strategy and depth of this game is absolutely incredible, and I love the replayability offered by having multiple Illuminati, not to mention the expansions adding more fun groups that you're able to use. It's just a huge amount of fun. That said, it is pretty difficult to get into. It's not exactly family friendly because some of the groups are a little bit meh, and you might have to do some explaining that you don't really want to do at the time, but regardless, it's tremendously fun, my personal favorite, and my number 1 hobby card game. Well, everybody, that's it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video of my top 10 favorite hobby card games. Now, I didn't notice it when I was first making the list, but I realized that I had a lot of 2-player games on this. It's not a bad thing, it's just a minor observation that I made. But that said, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the games that I have here do have boards, but they're not super necessary, and you can trade them out and do different things. And so, as always, I'm really curious what you guys have to say about it. How do you define a card game? Does it have to be something that's relatively small, like a deck of cards? Does it need to be something that just has card components? Can it have a board the way that I'm thinking of it? Please let me know any and all thoughts that you have in the comments below. I'm really, really curious to hear what you guys have to say about this. But that said, thank you so very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.